Well, hello, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started with some of our introductions. Welcome to First Chair Chat's Women Leaders in Music. My name is Blaine Brubaker, and I am the Music Access Services Manager at the UNT Music Library and the host of today's chat. We would like to open our event today by acknowledging that the land on which we gather at the University of North Texas is occupied unceded seas territory of the Wichita and Caddo affiliated tribes. These tribes have stewarded this land throughout the generations, and we would like to pay our respects to our elders, both past and present. As a reminder, please remember to use the Q&A function here in Zoom webinar if you have any questions for our panelists. If you would like to unmute your mic and ask a question, please type unmute in the Q&A section. We will do our best to answer all of your questions. Before we start actually asking any questions, let's introduce our panelists. Panelists, after I introduce you, please just take a little bit of time to tell us about yourselves. We'll start with Morgan Davis, Music and Arts Librarian at William and Mary Libraries. Morgan, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here with you all. So yeah, I'm the Music and Arts Librarian at the College of William and Mary. That's in Williamsburg, Virginia. I'm also a UNT alum. I got my philosophy degree from UNT as well as my MLS in music librarianship. I've been at William and Mary since September of 2018. My role is to oversee the music library, and I provide instructional support to art and art history, theater, speech and dance, Africana studies, and of course, music. So definitely keeps me on my toes. There's always something to do. I'm also a clarinetist by trade, so that's how I got involved with music. And prior to going to the University of North Texas, I spent time at the University of Texas at Austin pursuing a music education degree before I transferred to the University of North Texas. So that's me.
Thank you so much, Morgan. Next, please welcome Susannah Cline, head of the UNT Music Library.
Thanks, Blaine. So as you noted, I'm the head of the music library here at UNT and also a two-time UNT graduate like Morgan. So I've been in this role since October of 2019. Before that, I spent 13 years as the head of the music library and Bill Shirk Sound Archives at Bowling Green State University. I am, as of this Friday, the past president of the Music Library Association, and a role I've held for the last 2 years, I guess. And so that's where a pretty significant amount of my recent leadership work is. And I'll just say it's nice being the past president right now. I'm kind of enjoying that. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Susannah. Next, please welcome Megan Heber, Executive Director of the Children's Chorus of Greater Dallas.
Hi, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here with you today. A little bit about me. I am actually a New Jersey native. So born in New Jersey, raised in New Jersey, college in New Jersey. I was a music education major. After graduation, I had quite a desire to see the world. So I auditioned for and won a spot in the Navy music program. And I spent 5 years in service to our country, performing in Hawaii, New Orleans, and Virginia. After that, I worked at the University of North Texas as the event coordinator for the Murchison Performing Arts Center, and then as director of marketing, public relations, and communications for the College of Music. During that time, I did my MBA and MA at Southern Methodist University, and then was given a position as the executive director at the Children's Chorus of Greater Dallas, where I've been for about 3 years now. And we are one of the largest children's chorus programs in the nation, with more than 500 singers in our programs. I'm also adjunct professor here at UNT in the Arts Management and Entrepreneurship program and over at Rowan University.
Thank you so much, Megan. Next, please welcome Mina Malik, musician, arts consultant, and cultural organizer.
Thanks, Blaine. I want to say thanks to Gabby for inviting me. I think I'm the only one that doesn't have a UNT connection here, but super happy to be here. As mentioned, I'm a musician, I'm a singer, consultant within the arts, and a cultural organizer. based in Torrance, California, which is a little south of LA, on Quiche Cabelino and Tongva lands. And yeah, I got into music through actually opera. So I studied and did my degrees and got my master's at the New England Conservatory of Music in Boston. Performed for a while, transitioned into arts administration, did some general managing of orchestras, and then currently I serve as the program manager of theater at the New England Foundation for the Arts, which is based in Boston, supporting theater artists. And I also joined the Art Equity National Facilitator Training in 2019. So since then have been doing a lot of anti-racism, anti-oppression, consulting work and facilitation work. And I am originally from Japan. I immigrated to the US to attend college and then I stayed on. Yeah, so thanks for having me today.
Thank you, Mina. Finally, please welcome Courtney Wright, jazz saxophonist and composer arranger.
Hi, I'm Courtney. I want to say I'm excited to be here as well, and thanks to Gabby for inviting me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to talking and getting to know everyone's thoughts, so it's gonna be fun. But yeah, I'm a saxophone player. I play baritone saxophone, and I'm a composer, arranger, conductor. Right now I'm in New York, finally made it, I'm excited. And I went to UNT for about 2.5, 3 years. So just got done there. And now I'm here and just conducting at Manhattan School of Music. I'm helping out some of the reading bands right now. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Courtney. And thanks again to all of our panelists. Now, please welcome our moderator and primary organizer of today's first chair chat, Gabby Alvarado.
Thank you, Blaine, for introducing everyone today. When I was trying to organize this conversatory, which I will call it, or chat afternoon, I was trying to gather a group of panelists that would encompass as much of the music industry as I could. So as I start asking the questions today, I'll try as much as I can to go through the questions in the chat and some that I have prepared. But you will see a little bit of everything in the music industry as they have already introduced themselves. So the first question that I had, they already talked about what they've done. And what I wanted to know first is, have you seen your role shift during the pandemic as what you're doing? And we can start maybe with Courtney, since you were the last one to talk. And it could be just, you know, as a performer, as an arrangement, as a conductor, whichever way you would like to go with.
I guess I could go kind of multiple ways, but I'll try and touch a little bit and keep it short. But yeah, well, yeah, because the pandemic has obviously caused the arts to just not really be possible in the same way. So haven't been, you know, until recently, really haven't been playing with people, which has been kind of hard. It's been really hard. And that kind of feels like it kind of hinders me musically. Just, I don't know, it just doesn't feel natural. But yeah, basically it's just kind of like everybody else, haven't really been able to play as much, but still was able to do some composition projects and get some stuff out there. So that was cool, and some like virtual big band stuff. But as far as conducting bands and being out there and playing and stuff like that, that really did not change until really a couple weeks ago when, you know, at Manhattan School of Music right now, they're meeting in person. So I got lucky. Well, yeah, basically, I'm very blessed to be able to do that now, but I hadn't been doing anything outside of my room, you know, but besides the people I live with for a long time. So it was kind of hard, but now it's much better.
We can have then Mina, since you also do a little bit of music, and we can go with there as a performing artist.
Sure. Yeah, as a performing artist, it's been rough. Yes, I will be honest. I think last year in March, when this whole thing dropped on us, we were about to go on tour. And so we had to cancel the whole tour, which meant, you know, fellow musicians know what a tour entails, which is like, you know, canceling the flights, being on the phone with the flights to rearrange all that and figure out people who we arrange for childcare, like all these things that people don't initially think of that it encompasses. So that was really sad. And we had a residency as well that got canceled, and we were mid-development of a project. But during the pandemic, I have done 2 virtual performances with an organization that we have a relationship with. So those were great, like half-hour virtual concerts. So as a performing artist, I think, you know, the shift has been rough, but also there were just so many things that came up that I had to kind of tend to, that I been having a hard time finding time to be creative, to be honest, because I'm a parent with a kid that's virtual schooling with a full-time job. So basically, suddenly I felt like I was doing 3 full-time jobs and just didn't have enough of me to give. Yeah, so it's been rough, but I think the main role shift that I have made is really focusing on empathy and human-focused care to all the, you know, my supervisee and other staff at my organization, but also for myself, to have a lot of empathy for myself and lower that expectation. So those have been the shifts that I have made.
And it's great that you mentioned that, because I feel like, especially as freelance musicians, we sometimes forget to take care of ourselves. And it's sad to see that we have had to have such a force of nature to try to, again, force us to take care of ourselves. But then again, it's maybe a great opportunity to do it. Megan, why don't you tell us about what kind of shifts have you done in your role?
Sure. As executive director for Children's Course of Greater Dallas, I'm responsible for all of our human and financial decisions in the organization. Normally, it's a pretty predictable organization with programming and budgeting. We just have to accommodate for any differences in concerts or growth rates. And so normally it's a pretty predictable process. That has not been the case at all. We have really had to redefine how we plan, how we make decisions, how we get buy-in from all of our different stakeholders about the decisions that we made to make sure that our staff and our singers were safe. So we haven't closed. We haven't had to lay anyone off, but we did have to make some really difficult decisions with budgets and program delivery in specific to shift to that virtual learning atmosphere, and how to do that, and how to ask our employees to really make a shift in their day-to-day operations too, and what they're responsible for. Everyone had to pitch in. And I think minus just the nuts and bolts of running an organization in this pandemic, there was also that shift of being out in the community, and then that shift to being at home. That removal of the boundary between home and work was really crucial for the workforce and how we interact as coworkers. You get a glimpse into everyone's home lives, and everybody has different circumstances. They might have parents they're taking care of, children they're taking care of. So I found that leadership really became much more supportive, and accommodations really needed to be made with kindness and empathy, because everyone was going through unprecedented events, and everyone's day and workspace was different. So I think that the role shifted quite a lot in both the planning process, the usual planning process, the normal delivery, and then just leadership in general and what you need to do to care for your employees.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, I mean, you have a whole organization under you. That's a lot to have to change, thinking about like your entire staff, and then what performances can actually be done and how they can be done if possible. Especially when you're thinking about finances, not just the people that you're working with, but how do you continue having a successful organization. We're going to go next with Morgan. Morgan is also in charge of a department, but in a different way in academia, right?
Yeah, so I would say my role changed the most as far as like technological involvement. We have a studio for teaching and learning that was opened maybe 3 or 4 months before the pandemic started. And we also have a pretty substantive media center, which is used a lot for the film studies department. A lot of music majors use it for recording projects, et cetera. And so the music library that I run, we have like a little teeny, but I like to say mighty, recording technology collection. So we have, audio recorders, microphones, synthesizers, all sorts of cables and dongles and things like that. But when the pandemic started and everything started going online, students needed to figure out how to do audio recording from home in order to get the grade for their project. So my research consultations turned from, yes, I'll help you with Chicago citation and, combing through Realm to, yeah, let's talk about how to make this a solid quality recording. So my collaboration with the Media Center and the Studio for Teaching and Learning kind of took over, I'd say, most of my week, on top of having typical instructional responsibilities as well. A lot of the faculty at William & Mary decided that when they were shifting all of their classes online, it would be a really great time to request library instruction, which we always have a really hard time getting faculty to request library instruction. So the tables kind of turned for the better. It's helpful to be able to build those relationships with faculty and show that the library is there to help. But I had to learn a lot of things really quickly and be able to distill that into something that students could understand. And as far as those that I supervise, I have an incredible bunch of students that I watch over and that help me run the day-to-day at the music library. And they all went home with the exception of one. So I had one student who was sort of helping to courier physical activities from the items from the main library to my branch library. And somehow we made it through last spring and this fall. Things have kind of calmed down this spring, but it was definitely a lot of learning new things that I'm sure are going to be helpful in the future, but things that I did not necessarily expect to have to learn to do my job currently. So,
Morgan, that's funny that you said that because I feel we all had to do a little bit of the same, even here at the UNT Music Library. When you were just referring to how do we help the students, and I think Susannah can expand on that, but how do we help the students make their grades, especially when some of them just had to go home?
So for me, the biggest transition, both in my day job and the Music Library Association, which I should say is a volunteer position. So in theory, that's not my whole work life. But in both areas, I have felt like I turned into a very responsive leader rather than an active leader. And that's been sort of hard to deal with, to feel like you have to abandon all your agendas and plans, or not all of them, but a lot of them. And it does feel over time like we've gotten a little bit more back to normal so that we can say, all right, this is stable now. We know how to run things this way. So now we can think about other stuff. But, obviously those first few weeks, when it all happened, of trying to figure out how to work remotely, how to keep students employed. And we've been so lucky here that our administration has supported letting our student assistants work remotely. And we have the whole team working on that. So we've got, sort of mid-level supervisors in the music library who've done just a marvelous job of assigning tasks, doing follow-up, doing training, making documentation really, really clear and things like that. And so, you go from there, and then, I want to echo what everybody's been saying. It requires a lot of support and a lot of compassion. And I think a lot of forgiveness for ourselves and for others. And then what got difficult for me early on, then when dealing with all this in the day job, and then when some of the Music Library Association things started coming up and we had to pivot quickly there, it was that I found difficult to do both. And I mean, and I'm so lucky, I don't have kids at home. I'm not also balancing childcare like a lot of people do. And I don't know how anybody has done that. That seems impossible to me. And so I admire anybody who's made that happen. But so I can't even imagine this year if you added that in. But for that we had to start thinking very differently about what we did as an organization, and so how we would look at people who were disproportionately hit by the pandemic. We had a fundraising initiative early on. Our really great development officer came up with this idea of an emergency fund for members, and just things like that, of trying to ease the burden on our members and to figure out things that are different that normally wouldn't be the purview of the organization. Usually we're about music librarianship, and now we were having to get into a little bit more personal, somebody's personal life. And so it's been interesting, but I do think also at both levels, I have seen people pulling together a lot in this idea of, let's just stop saying we're sorry and just assume everybody's doing their best and not feel like we have to apologize all the time. And so that's been a change in culture that I think has been a really good one. But I just wish these circumstances weren't what it took to get there.
I'm gonna use a little bit of what Susannah was just talking about, and I'm gonna ask the next question. And I guess if somebody feels strong about answering, you can go first, and just so that I don't feel like I'm calling into out people. And this one is, what challenges have you experienced as a woman in the arts during the pandemic? Since she was just mentioning, like all the other things that you have to experience, and Megan also mentioned a little bit of this. It's like working from home all the time and having to have that balance between like, okay, this is maybe my time at home or my time to work.
And I can't say that this is probably more of an intersection of two different identities, but I'm sure, as we're all aware, during the pandemic, of course, there was the conversation and continuing conversation of the racial reckoning that's going on in our country. And all of a sudden, not only being a woman, but being a Black woman at this institution became a very interesting day-to-day sort of adventure. And it was almost like I became maybe a sort of culturally responsible for things that prior to that was not something that was part of my job description at all. And like Susannah said, and many of you have said, like, I don't have any children at home that I'm having to take care of. So that was something that was definitely making things a little bit easier. But in a lot of ways, it's been interesting to see how that intersection has changed how people view me as a professional in this field and view what I have to say about things as far as librarianship is concerned, collection goals, research methods, etc. So I guess that's not necessarily pandemic specific, but I don't think that the view that people have had towards these things would have necessarily shifted had we not all been forced to hit pause and, look inwardly. So that's been, I think, the biggest change for me there, or challenge.
I'm sure it's hard, but we appreciate everything that you have done. I mean, I think it's been, at least for me, a learning experience, because there's so much that I just didn't know before, and I had to, and the opportunity that we have now to just learn. But I think it would have been, if I as a person of color, I also have had to sometimes be the one educating others, and then that becomes also part of my job description that it wasn't before. So I definitely appreciate you sharing that. Courtney, would you like to chime in anything right now?
Not at the moment. I don't think I have anything that's specific to being a woman per se, for at least the pandemic, but I have things that are more like, I guess, things I've experienced of how it's hard, but I don't know if that's relevant to the question. So I think I'll just stay back for a second.
Does anyone else would like to chime in on this question? If not, we have a few more questions to go. Yeah, Mina, of course.
Yeah, I can chime in. And I think, Courtney, I think anything you share that's based off your identity is great. I would love to hear it. I think for me, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the balancing act of the parenting, virtual schooling, working, compounded with also what Morgan said, there's been a lot of anti-Asian hate crimes that have gone up quite a bit since the pandemic. And it's quite violent and it's quite terrifying, to be honest. So on top of all that's happening with the pandemic, and then having that kind of I guess it's racialized trauma that is kind of perpetuated on a daily basis on every front, from like my own fear, and then working at a predominantly white institution and being that voice all the time is exhausting. Also not being seen for the experiences and the weight that we carry every day is exhausting. Yeah, I think all the identities that I bring of where I intersect with how marginalized those identities are has been kind of exaggerated even more than usual. So yeah, I think the challenge is that it's really exhausting. um, and then there are things that keep me going, but yeah, that's a challenge.
Thank you, Mina. I appreciate that. I mean, I also always enjoy watching your Instagram stories and seeing how much Luca is like growing up. But I cannot imagine, having so much that we already have, and then on top of that, having to help your kid every day, and I find myself all the time exhausted, and then having to have the energy to still be compassionate to help your kid all day. So thank you so much for that. We have a question in the chat that is related to what we're talking, and here, just so that we can maybe talk a little bit, not so only about the challenges, but what kind of keeps us going. Have there ever been moments where another woman has really empower you or mentor you?
I can go on that one for sure.
Okay, Courtney, go ahead.
Yes. Well, currently, if you guys know Ingrid Jensen, she's a really great jazz trumpet player. She's pretty much one of my mentors right now, one of my biggest supporters. And I met her when she came to UNT, and she got me back involved with the big bands and just back involved musically in general. She just Zoomed me and said, "Courtney, do you want to come play baritone in some of the big bands right now at MSM? Do you want to conduct? We'll pay you." And I was like, what? Yes, of course. Because I mean, especially now, it's like that just was not happening. And I wasn't teaching anymore. I wasn't playing anymore. I wasn't even like, I was practicing at home, but it wasn't the same. And writing just wasn't right. And I just felt like, really, to be honest, I was really sad. And having that opportunity just like made me feel so excited. And I felt like my personality and myself came back, and it was just nice to be able to do that. But I guess she's just always been like a big supporter of me and what I'm trying to do musically and with composition and stuff like that. And so it's just really nice to have somebody kind of looking out for you and that supports you. I think that's really important, especially as women in jazz. It's not as common. I think it is getting to be more so, especially if you go into like middle schools and high schools. You see a lot more women playing jazz. I meet so many people out here, like, at the jams or when I go out and play, I meet a lot of other women musicians, but it's not as, balanced as there are men, just because of the history. So it's just like having those role models. When I think of my role models, they're not, most of them are men, because that's just what was there. I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, oh yeah. But then when there are, women doing the same thing, and that you see them successful in kind of what you want to do as well, and then they're also there uplifting you, it's really powerful to have that, so I would say all of my mentors have been amazing. But I think it's really important to have people that look like you, you know what I mean? And that are like you have kind of different experiences with things as well. So that was really great for me personally. So I'm just lucky to have her. Yeah.
I love seeing how excited you got when that question came. It's just gonna like light up the room. And I think that is one of the main reasons why I even wanted to organize this kind of chat, because of what you just said. Representation matters. It's like seeing people like you that are successful and are there, and that empower you to continue doing what you're doing. Anyone else wants to comment about those women who have empowered you to continue doing what you're doing. Susannah.
So yeah, for me, one of the most influential people has been Ruth Ann McTire, who was the music librarian during my undergrad at Baylor. And so, of course, she helped get me into this profession, for which I'm very thankful. But then I got to be on the board of directors of MLA while she was president. And she taught me so much about quiet leadership and just how you can be assertive without getting too, I don't want to say forceful, that's not the word I'm trying to get here, but just how to lead with kindness and compassion without trying to be too masculine, and how you do it, I think. And so taking this very feminist approach of gathering feedback and constructive conversations and let everybody play into what the outcomes are. And it was one of those things where it was a great model. And then she's the sort of person who just amplifies people all the time. And so if she knows of you and she knows what your strengths are, she will take advantage of that and make sure other people know it. And I think that's really important for women leaders to do, is to look out for other women who might, because they're not as aggressive, might not be at the top of everybody's minds, but just because they're not as loud sometimes. And so I think it really is important to have that fellowship amongst women leaders to bring each other up and to promote one another. And she's always been a model for that. And then just, the person who sends you a nice note when she knows things are hard. It's small, but it means so much when you're struggling. But she's been amazing for me.
Susannah, I think you're right. Sometimes just a small note, just even one sentence could help you so much, especially when things are definitely getting hard. Mina, thank you so much for that information. So she put, I would like to give a shout out to women of color in the arts, and provided us with the website in the chat. So those of you who are looking for some support or some mentors, definitely give it a check out that website. Anyone else would like to talk about their mentors and those who empower them before we move on to the next questions?
Can I add something if no one else?
Of course, yeah, of course.
I was gonna also say, I think that it's important to also have men that support you as well in the industry as well, just because if there's somebody that sees your gift and that sees your talent, it doesn't really matter who they are, you know what I mean? Or it's representation, yes, but also it's just sort of if there's somebody that's not a woman that supports you too, it just doesn't matter. It's just having somebody there that believes in you and that's gonna just say, you've got this, I've got you, let's work on growing and getting you to where you want to be in your career. And let's just focus on the music or on, whatever it is that you're doing. And then when you go out into the world, your gifts will be kind of seen. And so I'd say my biggest mentor was Rich DeRosa, who teaches at UNT. So, I will always speak very highly of Rich DeRosa because he very much helped me in a lot of ways. So that's just one of those things that I think is also important, is that just having mentors in general and people that see you, not just the color of your skin's oh, you're a Black person, I want to help you. Oh, you're a woman, you probably need some support, but people that see you for who you are and your gifts, and just want to bring that up. And that's it.
Yes, mentorship is it can take anyone farther than they think they can get, and just supporting each other. And I feel that in the arts we would like to see more. At least I would like to see it more. I have definitely see a little bit more of that this year. More programs at least that are being created and developed.
You should check out the Wejo Mentors program, the Woman in Jazz Org. I'll put a link in the chat.
Yes.
But I don't know, it's really great. I'm actually doing that now, and I have another mentor with that, and that's Christine Jensen, who's Ingrid Jensen's sister. So that's cool how that worked out. But you should check out her music. She's really great composer, saxophone player. But they pair you up with either somebody that's kind of doing what you're doing musically. So for me, I'm a composer and I play. So that's how I got matched up with Christine. And they'll match you up with somebody that has your interests, that can kind of help guide you, and you pretty much meet like whenever you can. And there's, yeah, it'll be better after the pandemic, but I'll put a link in the chat to that as well, because that's really cool.
Thank you so much for that. We have another question. I was wondering if there are practices, technologies, and/or programs that have been developed during the pandemic that you see continuing post-pandemic, or that you'll be relieved to forget about it and go back to normal.
I'm going to jump on for this.
Okay, of course.
So, and I'm going to speak from both my role as executive director for Children's Chorus, and also I'm a trustee at the Dallas Symphony Orchestra. So I'm going to kind of use both of those viewpoints. I personally do not think we will ever go back to the way it was. I think that this has actually forced us to have a reckoning with some of the things and the constraints and the barriers to arts participation that have always existed, but we've never really had the impetus or the motivation to really solve or try to fix. And I don't mean it as an or discussion. I do not think it's an or. I don't think it's in person or virtual. I think that this is really an and. I think we will go back to in person, but we've realized that no matter how great or accessible our in-person programs are, we will always have people who can't participate in them. The arts are really hard to participate in. You have to, if you're, for example, concerts, you have to find out about the concert, then buy the ticket, which could be really expensive, then battle Dallas traffic on 35 to get down to the Dallas Arts District, find parking, pay for parking, go into the hall. You don't know what to wear, how to behave, where to sit, when to clap. It's really, really, really hard sometimes to participate in the arts. But virtual kind of gives us a new vehicle for introducing the arts to new audiences, for reaching rural communities who cannot physically ever come to our performances. And I think that this has really forced us to reckon with these big constraints that have always existed. And it also gave us the latitude and the flexibility to innovate and to experiment and to try new things. So I think that the arts will look very different going forward. We will, I'm sure, have in person. There is that tangible, those vibrations, that being in a room and experiencing an artistic endeavor with other people. But I think that it's going to be an and that there will be more experiences and more technology, especially as VR gets better too. As virtual reality gets better, this conversation may change drastically. But I think that the world has changed and the arts are changing along with it, which is great. I'm so excited that we are not kind of putting our heads in the sand and not looking around us. I'm glad we're recognizing these changes. And technology really gives us a way to access people who would not normally have the access to us. So yes, I think that the normal will never be the normal we knew before COVID, but I'm at least personally very excited about what this new normal could be.
I think, I mean, I agree with everything you said. There is so much about art that I see we could definitely continue applying, but especially accessibility. That's always something that for me has been in the forefront that of everything I do. And I see finally, again, we're being forced to make it more accessible. And I would like to see many of the organizations, and maybe someone else has more to add to that, but continuing to apply those things that are working now, and seeing how many more people we are able to reach out to. Does anyone else have anything else to say on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to note, I think one of the challenges we're going to have is to figure out how to blend things in a hybrid environment. Because I think we've created this expectation for virtual access to things. And I think we've seen how much more inclusive that can be, how much more accessible it can be. And then, we have people just itching though for in-person experiences though. So I think it's going to be difficult, but perhaps fun to figure out ways that we can kind of simultaneously create both with the same level of access and inclusion for both sides. And so that's one of the things that I think has come out of this that will be really interesting to see. And it's going to take a lot of creativity to get through that too. But I think there are going to be some great opportunities here.
Yeah, I can add.
Oh,
Sorry.
Go ahead,
Courtney. No, Courtney, go ahead. I'll go after you.
Okay. I was gonna say that honestly, this pandemic stuff can end. With jazz, it sucks. I'm just gonna be straight up. It's awful with that. This music that we play, it's a music that you have to interact in order to learn. And it's different when it's even harder to learn it if you're, even before the pandemic, if you're in an area where there aren't other musicians, or, you're in a place where you literally you have to play with like backing tracks, or you don't have any other physical people. But the way to learn is like going and listening to the music live and interacting with your friends and just jamming on tunes and practicing and hearing. And there's something about the in-person experience that it just cannot be replicated. And so there have been some things, like I put something in the chat. There's these improv games that Ingrid Jensen was telling me about, and her and another person, I can't remember his name, but if you go to that link, there's really interesting things that they were doing just to get their students and kids involved creatively, just improvising over Zoom and kind of using the latency and stuff like that to do these cool kind of projects that really are kind of neat. But at the end of the day, there's nothing like, Smalls, the jazz club in New York, just opened back up last weekend. And I went because I'm vaccinated, so like I'm safe for the most part. And everybody was there. They only have a 25-person capacity, but it was like a line of musicians. People were just trying to listen. I got in somehow, got to play, saw my friends. Like the music was just alive. I don't know how to explain it, but ever since then, I was just like, oh, I'm shedding like so much, and just like I'm inspired to write again. And I heard things that honestly, there's nothing that can replace it. Even if, like with the technology is cool, but there is nothing like interacting with friends. If there's a way, we've been having, like, as the weather gets warmer, having socially distanced jams in parks, or just knowing that having like isolated pods of people that you normally play with, you know what I mean? And being safe, but still meeting up and doing things. It's been happening throughout the pandemic, and it's just, without it, the music just doesn't happen. It's like you have to be in person to do this music. It just is. So I don't know how it is with other types, but I know with jazz, it's very much like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to add another layer too. I support, in my philanthropy work, we support creation and touring of devised ensemble theater work. And what is touring right now? It's a real struggle. And I agree, Susannah, that creativity is going to be really crucial, and artists are probably going to be the ones that lead the way towards innovation and how we integrate this accessibility that we have gained, which a lot of the disabled artists have always been at the forefront of already. And I feel like we're like catching up. But there's also the issue of like a lot of Native communities not having internet access. So the access to, even if it's online, it doesn't matter. And for our touring artists, there have been some artists who were able to kind of adjust their work so that it's kind of a hybrid model or a virtual model, but some work is just not meant to be virtual. It is meant to be performed in person, because that kind of community building is really hard to do virtually. And we don't want to penalize those people who have that vision too. So that has been a struggle for us to figure out. And in our grant cycles, we have opened up that definition of touring to include virtual or any kind of sharing of the work, whatever you can do safely. But it's an interesting conversation that we continue to have with our artists.
It's also interesting to see how it affects students as well, and kids in general, even outside of music. But I was nannying for a while, and I was nannying a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old. It was great. But I could definitely understand how, like, if you have your own kids, that's like, I was doing that 8 hours a day. That was rough, but I loved those girls. They were amazing. But I just, being on the screen all day, like, I don't know. I mean, you already know this, especially this generation coming up. It's just like, that's just sort of their world is online anyway. And in being able to engage off screen, I feel like is so important. I would see sort of like how they wanted that. They're like, Courtney, let's play or let's do other things. But it's just everything that they were doing, every activity had to be online because of COVID. And I just remember one of the girls was like, do you know when it's going to be over? I miss my friends, and it was just getting kind of like, it's hard because, with kids, it's like, man, they're saying the same things. They're thinking the same things I'm thinking. They want to engage in person too. And I feel like, especially with this technology driven world, we need more of having that in-person interaction, especially for development, socially, and just everything. There's just stuff that you can't do through the computer. And also staying on top of all the schedules and Zoom meetings and things like that is kind of hard. So at least for me. So yeah.
Yeah, I think balance, like in everything, right? Um, I'm sure that a year ago nobody thought we were still gonna be here, right? Extremes of everything are difficult for whatever you do. So I think as we start thinking about what our next, what I call the new normal, because we're never gonna go back. I think how do we balance out? How do we become creative? And I think that's beautiful, especially for in my case, the classical music world that seems to be, for the most part, too stagnant for my taste. How do we become creative and continue moving? We have one more question in the chat. She says, I'm a composition major here at UNT, and there are not really that many women in the class. Less than 5% in my current class. And some of us are just taking a class for fun. They're not actually composition majors. Do you have any idea why there are fewer women signing up for composition? I would like to go into the film composition, and there are barely any female composers. So I think that's probably more for Courtney than for anyone else. And so again, why is it so hard to find female role models in music? It's like her other question.
Well, just look at I always feel like this question is a good question, and I never really hear it answered this way, but this is what I believe. Look at the history of women in this country, or even around the world. There are some places where women are still not allowed to even just like do what we're doing here or even work. You know what I mean? It's just sort of, it takes time for, I think, things to change. And so we're kind of coming up now in this generation where we're doing this, you know what I mean? But we're not seeing as many role models as they're there, but there's less. And so that's why I think it's just sort of like the history. If you think of the timeline, it really hasn't been that long since women had gotten rights or since things changed in the workplace and things like that. It really has not, it's like hasn't been that much time, I don't think, in the big scheme of things. So that takes time for stuff to change and to integrate. So I would say that's, I think, one of the biggest reasons. Also, I think a lot of times in music, at least with, I guess it goes with composition and playing, you see a lot of kids and stuff, and there's a lot of women in like middle and elementary and high school and stuff, but then it's like, why don't they continue on to college? Many reasons, but it's just sort of, they might feel discouraged, or like there aren't other role models, or they may just, maybe there could have been other factors there that discouraged them from continuing. And I think that a way to kind of change that is just to continue to have these mentor programs, continue to go to the schools, meet these young women, and continue to help them build their sense of self-esteem, self-worth, so that they can go out there. Because you're going to encounter people that, you're always going to encounter somebody that does not think that women can, or for whatever reason. It's going to happen at some point. That's all I will say. So sort of like being able to be like, I know who I am. I know that I'm good at what I do, and I'm going to keep going through this. This person's opinion is there, but that's chill, but I know how to deal with this gracefully and continue on. And that usually most people are on your side with that. But as far as that, I think that's kind of one of those things. And I don't remember what the rest of the question, I think there was like something else in there. Oh yeah. But yeah, if you're looking to go into film composition, do it. You know what I mean? Just do it. Like, and keep looking up to the people that you've been looking up to, you know, because they're, at the end of the day, whoever's writing what you want to sound like, that's who you want to copy. It could be a male, it could be a female, it could be an alien, I don't know. But if they're like, if the music is what you're hearing and that's what you want to do, then you go for it. And at some point, you'll probably find some people that are also doing it along with you. So I don't know much about like film composition specifically and females in that, but I do know about jazz composers and other people in that realm. And I know that first, I didn't know many women in that regard at all, even just like a couple of years ago. And now I know so many, you know, some older than me, some younger, some the same age. So it's just like being inspired by your peers as well. And using this technology even to connect with people that might not be in your area. Because a lot of times people can't even afford to go to school. I couldn't afford to finish school, one of those types of things, you know? So there's a lot of different factors why there's probably other women composers that are not at school or that aren't at UNT. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where just hang in there and keep doing what you do and being inspired by whoever you're inspired by and writing the music. That's really what's the most important. And then you'll be that role model one day. Like someday people will be looking up to you and there won't be this, why are there no women? But we have to kind of be those pioneers right now because it's still kind of changing. So yeah.
And I love everything that Courtney just said. And I think that's true. Don't let it discourage you that you might be in the minority in the room. My mom tells me stories from 30 years ago. She had the choice to be either a nurse or a teacher. Those were the two options. Those were the career paths. And that was 30 years ago. Vienna Philharmonic didn't allow women in until 1997. 1997, that was not that long ago. So it's, I don't want to say it's a burden. I think we all have this unique point of history to be these role models, to bring up other women with us and to be the pioneers, like Courtney said, into these roles that have not been typically open to women. When I was in the military, there's like 10% of us were women. In my MBA classes, we had a class of 50, there was 5 women in it. For executives of nonprofits, I think the number right now is 35% of executives for nonprofits are women. We're making progress, but it does take time. It just takes time to get women up into those leadership roles. And the best we can do is support each other, encourage each other. Don't let imposter syndrome take over. Know your worth, know your value, and keep pushing so that we make it better for the women behind us in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years and make these systems easier to crack and break.
We are getting to almost the end of our time, and I want to be respectful for everyone's time. We cannot discuss everything that we want to discuss for a topic like this in 60 minutes. But I guess the last question that I'll have is like just to give us any advice for women in music, whatever you think will be helpful for all of us out there listening, and that will be looking at our archives of the videos from today. If you have any advice to give us, what would that be?
I can start. I would say read as much as you can and listen as much as you can. Too often, as women, I think it's one of our greatest skills is that we can listen and be empathetic and really take in and internalize what we're learning, whether it's through reading or listening to other people. Go out and seek different opinions from you and really consider those and really try to learn from those. I think one of the biggest lessons in my life that I've learned that has served me well is how the more I learn, the more I know nothing, and really keep pushing towards that of gaining more knowledge and knowing that your viewpoints might change too. And that's okay. It's okay to not be static. It's okay to grow and develop and have a different opinion now than you did 6 months ago and a year. So self-growth and reading and listening to other people, that is the biggest advice I have.
Thank you, Megan.
I guess I can go. Don't be afraid of failure. Don't be afraid of taking risks. It sounds simpler than it is, but it's the truth. And also, just there's not always one route to something. You know what I mean? I didn't have at the end of my experience at UNT, it was great. I had an amazing time there, but at the end of the day, the curriculum for me, there were things that just didn't work for me. And I thought, like, if I don't finish school, everyone was telling me, you're going to fail, you're not going to be able to do anything. Like I thought there was like nothing else to life. I just thought that was the only way to be successful, quote unquote. And that was not true. And I'm doing the things that I wanted to do, even during the pandemic, without having, without having had finished school. I wish I could have, but it didn't work out that way. Also, it's sort of like taking risks and doing things that you're afraid of. Also, like Megan said, seeking out people's opinions, their ideas, their thoughts, and taking those in and understanding that other varying experiences exist. You know what I mean? And it's just good to be aware of those things, and it could inform you. But I think the biggest thing is not to be afraid of taking risks and not to be afraid of taking failure, because that's the only way to grow. It's not really failure. It's really just an opportunity. It's learning experiences and opportunities for growth is what every experience will be. And that's the biggest thing I can say. Yeah. Oh yeah, and one thing to add to that also in that regard, I guess one of the biggest things for me is when I brought in like a chart once, a few times, that just sounded, it was just bad, like it did not work out. And I thought, oh, like this is so embarrassing, whatever. But there were a lot of things, but at the end of the day, experiencing that, I thought, okay, I'm gonna look at this objectively. What actually, was it bad overall? Am I a bad writer? No. Was the chart bad? There were things in it that didn't work. So I think just not looking at things in these ultimatums and taking out, when I brought it back later, I was able to use that stuff, and it was very informative, and I learned a lot about, I learned a lot more than I would have, and I discovered a lot more things than I would have otherwise. And it was really great. But I think that's just one of the biggest things, is to just go for everything. If you have opportunity, go for it. Don't question it. Don't be afraid, like, oh, I don't have enough experience to do that, or oh, I don't have enough money to do that, or oh, I don't think I'm good enough, or whatever. Just do it and you'll make it happen, no matter what anybody says, so.
But I think the converse too, when you're thinking about risky behaviors, in the interpersonal side, is you're going to make mistakes sometimes. And I think it's always really important to own that without excuses and to apologize when necessary. And I think you really need to learn how to apologize sincerely. And back to what Megan was saying with listening very carefully. And I think there are few things that can hurt one's sense of leadership more than an unwillingness to acknowledge mistakes. And so I think we all need to learn to do that as gracefully as possible.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And also not being afraid to make those mistakes, because like, if it's harder to take, I think, responsibility for the mistakes when you feel ashamed that you made one. No one's perfect. And that's fine. If you expect yourself to be perfect, you're going to be thinking, you're going to expect that from other people. And it doesn't work. So it's like being able to own up to that. But in that, I think part of that process is also being able to like forgive yourself and to understand that you don't have to be perfect, because you're not going to be perfect. And that's cool.
One advice, I guess it's not one, I mean, referring to the earlier question too about, why aren't they women? And, there's lots of reasons basically there are systems that are making that happen in this way, and the systems are working in the way that they wanted it to work. So we're kind of dismantling systems. And I think we have to have an intersectional lens when we're tackling this. So when I make suggestions or advices, I'm coming as a woman of color, and that intersection is really important. And I think the roles that we play as people who live in this society dismantling systems, we need to be very clear about the roles that we play and the power that we bring with us. So specifically talking about, dismantling white supremacy culture in the arts field, it's just what I do for my arts consultant work. I always say that values are meaningless without practice of embodiment. Organizations that have Black Lives Matter statements and all these stuff, it doesn't mean anything if you are not actually practicing it in policy changes, in ways that you're treating your staff, in ways that you're talking to constituents in your community. So that's kind of the biggest thing that I think we really need to reckon with. Where is your positionality in that? What is your value in that? And clarifying it and practice it. And I echo what everyone is saying. You're going to make mistakes, and that's the whole point. Mistakes are not a bad thing. It's somewhere that you learn. As long as you don't repeat your mistakes, then that's how you learn. So fail forward and keep doing this work, and we will dismantle all the systems so that we can all thrive.
I know we're over time, but I think I'll just chime in really quickly with some things that have really helped me kind of remember to extend myself some grace and to have courage when it feels really difficult to have courage. One of them is assuming positive intent from people, even if it's very clear that they have no actual desire to be positive towards you. I like to, and this is actually something I learned as a cataloging assistant at UNT, thanks Jean Harden, always in my corner. But the idea that a lot of times when you get to the level that pretty much everyone here is, you've gotten there by hopefully learning from your mistakes and being probably pretty good at least a few things. So it stings when you do something wrong. But when someone corrects you, or when someone might microaggress towards you or knock you back, take it as a little gift, because it's something that you can grow from. It's something you can put in your back pocket and move forward, and to not take it personally. So I think that is a really, really helpful thing, because I think especially in this culture that we have now, where the marginalized and the oppressed are starting to have their voices amplified, I think our meters and our radars are at high alert almost always. And so anytime someone speaks against any part of your identity, it can feel like they're trying to cut you down. So I think it's nice to try to be able to maintain a little bit of objectivity wherever you can. And another thing that I think is really helpful to remember is to trust yourself. You're always going to be adding something just by virtue of being who you are and showing up. And I think a lot of times we feel like if we don't have all of the, I hate to say this quote, but all of the best words, or, all of the, everything that you need to present yourself in the way that you feel is most ideal, that all of a sudden it's maybe not as valuable, it's not as valid. But that's absolutely not true, because everyone's perspective, especially in the roles that we're all trying to play and elevate ourselves in, it is valuable information to bring to the table. And lastly, perfect is the enemy of the good. And I like to say perfect is the enemy of the done, because I'm a person who will think myself into paralysis, and I'll have a great idea and I'll think myself out of doing it because I can't think of the perfect way to get there. And so, just like many other panelists have said, just start. Even if you can't see the end of the tunnel, you'll be one step closer than you were before if you just start. So that's all I have to say about that.
And that's a beautiful way to end today. Just start, right? Thank you so much for your time and for joining us this afternoon from every part of the country today. I am incredibly grateful for all your wisdom and vulnerability that you offered today. And hopefully we'll reconnect again at some point during this conversations hosted by the UNT Music Library. Kathleen, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Gabby. And thank you to everyone who presented today and talked today. Thank you, Mina. Thank you, Susannah. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, Courtney. And thank you, Megan. And thank you, Gabby, for organizing this wonderful, wonderful chat. It's been great to hear everyone talk and to hear your insights. And it makes me feel really empowered to go out now and be creative and to work on new projects and to take risks. And that is so important and so cool.